Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
The true origin of today's episode starts in 1632 with the birth of one Antony van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch businessman in the fabric trade. Leeuwenhoek, in an effort to better see the threads of fabrics that he wished to purchase, in an effort to determine their worth, developed a method of producing incredibly small and powerful lenses, and is credited with the invention of the first microscope. After refining the technique, Leeuwenhoek went on to be the first person on Earth to see unicellular life. And now, hundreds of years later, the field of microscopy has developed to the point that we no longer use light, but electrons to see the smallest parts of our world. That being said, optical lenses are still used in a wide variety of cases, from cameras to medical devices, and with it comes opportunity for business to flourish. One of the largest players in this space is Olympus, the Japanese company which you may know best for its production of high-end cameras, but also controlled a major market share in medical imaging technology, such as endoscopes. Because of this, Olympus was one of the largest companies listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange in the 90s and 2000s. However, after being appointed its first ever foreign-born CEO, the Brit Michael Woodford would discover some skeletons within the accounting closet of Olympus. So say cheese as we develop the big picture behind what has been dubbed the Japanese Enron.
I got really angry during the Enron episode.
As you should. It was awful.
So we'll see if I get as angry today.
They don't make fun of old ladies in this one, so that's the thing with Enron that always sticks with me is like, man, those people really did make fun of old ladies.
I don't remember.
That's when they were like, who cares if grandmas are out of power in California when they were like
right.
causing
Those
the false
fucking
deficit
assholes.
there? Yeah, they were dicks. So welcome back, everybody, to White Collars, Red Hands. As always, it's Kashan hanging out with Nina. If you're watching the podcast,
I look terrible.
You might notice that Nina looks a little bit like the beginning of a 90s movie where they take... What's that 90s movie where they make the bet where he turns the ugly girl into a prom queen?
I don't know.
And it's literally just like she like takes off her glasses and like takes down her ponytail and you're like, wow, she was hot the whole time.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you're just at the beginning of that movie.
I'm going just like a caterpillar blossoms into a butterfly.
You're going to have your hot girl transformation.
I too will have my hot girl moment. Everyone watching will be like, she is as ugly as she sounds.
I told her there was no way that's ever possible. She could never look as ugly as she sounds.
Kashan did say I sound like a female rugby player.
Yeah, she does. I'm going to have to edit out those sniffles.
I know, I'm
or
so
leave
sorry.
a minute at this point. Now it's just a joke. Now that we led up to it.
I'm a little under the weather.
Hey, it's good because now people at home know you're not, like people who just listen to the podcast know you're not faking.
No, I'm not faking it. I thought I was going to die on the highway today. My head hurt so bad. I was like, I might pass out. And then I just kept driving.
Sounds like you shouldn't have been driving, but all right.
Probably shouldn't have been driving.
That's a bad decision. And you know what else is replete with bad decisions?
This episode?
Man, this one actually is pretty crazy. I learned a little bit, and soon you will too, about Japanese economics and a little bit about Japanese corporate culture.
Oh, yeah, it's fucked up.
And today, this story has a hero.
We need a hero.
And holding out for a hero to the end of the night. So let's just get right into it.
I do want to say I have a very close connection with Japan. I lived there for a year. Fun fact.
Hey, there we go. Well, you might be able to actually answer some questions.
I probably won't be, but
probably not. Just be like, what does boba taste like?
I fucking love boba.
I bet you do. The company, now known as Olympus, was established all the way back October of 1912 by a lawyer named Takeshi Yamashita in order to create domestic microscopes in Japan, all the way back in 1912. But they also focused on the development of thermometers. Weird pairing. Not 100% sure why. They were like, you know what? Microscopes and also thermometers, except for like they both do science stuff.
Yeah.
I guess. Just months after the company was founded, Yamashita's team of engineers developed their first microscope called the
Asahi.
Asahi. Thank you. See, that's why we have you here. It's a regular early 1900s like compound microscope. Looks like a telescope, but pointed down. That's how I could describe it. The big difference is that this was the first one produced by industrial methods in Japan. So you wanted a microscope before, they were making them by hand.
Oh shit.
You know, like they were hard to get and they were expensive, or you imported them. Like other places were making industrial build microscopes, but not in Japan. So that was the first one. In 1936, Olympus brought its first camera to market. Interestingly titled the Semi-Olympus, like what I got slow dancing in middle school. Am I right? What's up? You did not like that one. That's fine. The camera was fitted with one of the company's now famous lenses. And from here on out, Olympus would be known mostly for its camera technology. You would be mistaken, though, if you thought that Olympus stayed merely a camera company.
Nay.
Although I told you already they didn't. Although they still make microscopes to this day, they were still in the microscope business. Olympus found a large market share in other forms of medical imaging. I assume one day their engineers were just sitting in a lab, looking at a camera and thinking, what if that went up someone's butthole? And then they did that.
Funny enough, so I had gone on a couple dates with this guy who was either going to be a cardiologist or the doctor that puts the scope up your butt.
A gastroenterologist?
Yes, a gastroenterologist. Yeah, one of those. And he was like, I was like, well, which one do you want to do? And he's like, honestly, the gastroenterologist.
That's close enough.
Whatever. He's like, it's kind of fun because it's kind of like a video game.
What?
He was like putting the camera up there and
he's playing strangers' assholes like it's fucking Far Cry 3?
Yep.
All right.
He's like, yeah, it's kind of like a good video game.
What's with you and doctors? Because
I love them.
You got ER doc too.
I got ER doc. I've got a couple nurses under my belt. I love first generation men in the medical field.
Hey, you heard it here first.
You heard it here first.
If you're a first generation man in the medical field, even a janitor at a hospital.
Yeah.
I know.
It's fine. You're not gonna lose your job. They're always gonna need a janitor.
That's true. Because of the blood.
Yeah, because of the blood and the vomit and the piss and the poop.
All the above.
Yeah. Yuck.
So Olympus is credited with the creation of the first flexible endoscope, which scares me that there were inflexible endoscopes before that.
I mean, yeah.
Don't know how that works? Don't want to know how that works. It's fine.
Man, could you imagine your booty hole after getting rammed with one of those?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yow.
But the first flexible endoscope was used for getting all the nooks and crannies, and as of today, they still hold a whopping 70% market share in GI endoscopes.
Wow.
During the reign of their film cameras, though, a young political science grad named Tsuyoshi Kikukawa joined the corporate fold and quickly worked his way up the ranks, stopping at one point as managing director for PR and advertising. And while performing his duties, Kikukawa saw a burgeoning demand for digital SLR cameras and developed a strategy to front-run them in this department. His strategy worked, and Olympus released a 800,000 pixel digital camera in 1996, which is about double the pixels of a standard 480p definition TV. So it's not HD pictures yet.
they were
you know,
they were getting there.
It's not awful. And by the way, the next best ranked camera had less than half that.
Oh wow,
pixel wise. So they did good. It was good. People liked it. And this propelled Kikukawa into the positions of CEO, president, and chairman of the board all at the same time.
Wow.
Which could still happen at this time. Obviously, in America, you can't do that. Your CEO cannot also be your chairman of the board and your president. There are rules against that, at least for publicly held companies. And the rule of Kikukawa would be an absolute one. Although he was widely regarded as having a quote-unquote Western style of company management, the roots of loyalism in Japanese corporate structure run deep.
Yeah.
You are loyal to the death for the company you work for. Mm-hmm. The amount of loyalty that Japanese corporate workers have is
very toxic.
Insane. Yeah, they will do whatever, whenever. Most boardrooms are just they all listen to one person, and no matter what they say, they're just yes.
Yep.
There's no discussion about anything. You listen to the person directly above you and tell other people below you what to do, and that's it.
Yeah.
This, of course, can't be said for those who grew up outside of Japan, however. It happens here in America, but we're a little bit more feisty. We'll tell our bosses to fuck off every now and again. Well,
and there's also a difference in just the culture in general. I when I was living in Japan, it was described to me that Eastern mindset, in Japan, and even this goes to China and all of Asia. Eastern culture is very community minded, whereas Western culture, our culture, is very individually minded. So we think what is best for me, what's I'm going to do what's best for me. And over there they go, well, what is best for my community? And so that's where you get some of this blind loyalty and blind loyalty to companies and to family and things like that, because you don't want to cause an issue. And so that's why it's so much blind dead devotion.
I think the hardest thing is that the real answer is somewhere in between those, which no one ever wants to hear, because that's hard. You can't just think about one way. You got to think about all of them.
No, you do. You do.
But because this is, like you said, a very Eastern mindset, when in 2011, Kikukawa decided to appoint a foreigner, the Brit Michael Woodford, as president of their medical imaging division, Kikukawa was not ready for just how against the grain Woodford was willing to go. So first, we have to get into a little backstory about what happened in the Japanese economy leading up to the 90s through the 80s. So while me and Nina were merely glints in the eyes of our fathers and swimmers in... well, I'll let you finish that sentence. In Japan, the market was booming. And this might seem really good for Japanese companies, right? Mm-hmm. But it wasn't, because the yen was becoming more and more highly valued. The yen was strong, which actually hurt the ability for export deals because they weren't making as much money back, because the yen was worth getting close to what a dollar was worth. So when they were getting US dollars in return for payment of what they were exporting, now that the yen was doing better, they were actually making less money on the conversion. Shit. And so this stagnated profits. So, well, what do you do when that happens? You make risky bets. All right. Boy. And companies ran to the Tokyo Stock Exchange to buy stock in each other with borrowed money from the banks in a bunch of speculative deals. And everyone saw results because, like I said, the economy was booming, but it was booming in part because all these companies were taking out debt to then invest in other companies in Japan. So they were all boosting each other with all this debt, but you can't do that for forever, because that's the definition of a bubble. And bubbles, of course, pop. And this one was no different. In the aftermath of the ensuing crash, it was found that companies were making really risky bets like derivatives and rate swaps, among others. And the accounting laws in Japan, they actually let you list these speculative assets at their purchase value, not their fair market value. So when you reported them on your books, you would report them as what you paid for them, not what they're worth now. So if they went down,
Oh, fuck.
you don't have to report that loss.
Why?
That's just how accounting worked in Japan at the time.
That doesn't make sense.
It's called not mark to market. You don't have to adjust your assets to fair market value. You only have to list them as what you purchased them for, even if they've gone down. Theoretically, at some point, they should get a readjustment, but like you didn't have to until you wanted to. Which, yeah, it's dumb because, you know, you basically lost money on it. As long as you just held it, though, you would never have to report it. But luckily, this bubble pop taught Japanese lawmakers their lesson on this. And in the 90s, they said from here on out, no more dirty tricks. We're adopting mark to market. You have to report your assets for their fair market value if they're speculative assets like this. So Olympus, facing down the barrel of a gun and knowing that they were going to have to admit some losses, immediately started thinking up some other dirty little tricks.
Those dirty little bastards.
I know, right? And the next little dirty, filthy little trick they came up with was a way to move the almost worthless assets off their books before they'd have to record the loss. And the way they did this is in a way we have seen multiple times before. Actually, they set up a couple of the internal auditors and like the compliance officer in the company set up a bunch of shell companies,
Okay.
mostly in the Cayman Islands,
Okay.
that were funded with loans for the startup capital, and they quote unquote bought the assets that were going to lose money for Olympus. They bought those assets from them at the market that they were at, what they paid them for. So technically, they were basically breaking even on them on their books, but they were really buying their own assets with another company.
You can't do that.
And overpaying for them to basically. Now you're probably thinking, well, this doesn't work forever because they still own the other company, right? So someone has to pay back those losses, which is true. But they were like, well, what we'll do is we'll get them off Olympus's books so we don't have to report them, and then we'll just like bet more to try and win it all back. Basically, we'll invest even more and even more risky investments, and hopefully we can just pay them off at this other company. This moved their losses from their books and padded their balance sheets. At the end of 2 years, from 1997 to 1998, Olympus managed to move assets totaling more than 64 billion yen into multiple shell companies. Now, of course, you can't just write sold a bunch of shady assets to companies in tax haven countries, because they were all set up on like the Cayman Islands, on the balance sheet. Plus, the purchases to the shell companies was, once again, financed with more debt. So Olympus also discovered a way to hide this flow of the capital out of the company. So they started making a bunch. We've also seen this too a couple of times, but they started making a bunch of like really weird acquisitions. Like they would acquire companies that they had no business owning as a medical imaging company. Like a microwave food manufacturer. That was one of the ones they mentioned. Like they made the little microwave meals.
Why are they on that? Because it could.
Well, what they needed to do is keep bringing in companies so that when they acquired them, they could overvalue them and say that they paid more for them than what they did. And then they would put the excess value to the company as goodwill. Because basically, when you buy a company and you're another company, and technically they only have like physical assets, like let's say they have this many computers, they have this many chairs, whatever. They have physical assets worth like $2 million, but you paid $10 million for them. That excess, the $8 million, you write on your balance sheet as something called goodwill, which is, it means like intangible, it's an intangible asset. So it's like other stuff you're paying for, like patents or intellectual property, things that you can't like hold. They're not tangible, but they still have worth to them. So that's usually what it's used for. But they were like way overpaying past that and then just writing it all off as goodwill. And goodwill at this time, also in Japan, this changed later, could be amortized. which if you remember what amortization is, it's when you can split the payments for an asset that you bought over a certain period of time. It let them, whatever they didn't move off, and they still had to hold, now they could at least split the payments over their balance sheet so the losses were spread out.
Okay.
So which made things look better in the end of it. Yeah, over multiple periods. And thereby reducing the overall impact of the losses that couldn't be made up by other means. At this point, no one was any the wiser about this scheme. Even their auditor, KPMG, hadn't blown the whistle on...
Sorry.
You're good. Even their auditor, KPMG, hadn't blown the whistle on the over-evaluations. But a Japanese finance magazine was the first to point out some of the irregularities in the business of Olympus. In an article in Facta, the Japanese financial magazine, they asked questions about a whopping $687 million paid to consulting fees during the acquisition of a medical manufacturing company in Europe by the name of Gyrus. And this is also where we reintroduce ourselves to Michael Woodford.
Bum, bum, bum.
So Michael Woodford was overseeing the European medical division in 2008 when Olympus acquired Gyrus. But for some reason, the Tokyo headquarters handled the whole deal without any of his oversight. Even though he thought, he's like, I literally control this aspect of the company. Why wasn't I included? So he started asking some questions. And although he had worked his way up the ranks of this company, he had worked here for 3 decades at this point. Like, he started as like a salesperson and worked all the way up to being the lead of their European medical division. So he's been here for a while. He's done a lot of stuff. And this made him consider resigning from the company because he was like, they're doing this without my permission. He thought it was kind of fishy and he almost resigned. But he decided to stay. He was convinced to stay, and after many years of solid leadership, Woodford was promoted to the Tokyo office to be the president of the whole company. That is when that Facta article was calling into question Gyrus and the Gyrus acquisition, and that was passed to Woodford by a German colleague. And he wasted no time bringing the article to the attention of Kikukawa. He literally got it and was like, this is shady. Why did we pay over $600 million in consulting fees? That doesn't happen. He called Kikukawa's receptionist. It was like, hey, I saw this article. I need to talk to Kikukawa today about it. And she was like, okay, let me call you back. And she calls him back and she said something along the lines of, well, Mr. Kikukawa is very busy today, but since you're so insistent, he says that he'll meet you during his lunchtime. So already he's like, and I mean, you know about like Japanese people wouldn't really talk to each other like this.
No.
Right? Like
no.
That's disrespectful.
Yeah.
To say, and you don't disrespect someone like that in Japan. So already he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
That wasn't okay.
No.
And it got even less okay because he shows up to the meeting and he walks in, and this is like a terrible story. He walks in and he looks, and Kikukawa has this like big ornate sushi platter in front of him. And then he's like, oh, okay. And he even says, he's like, everyone knows that I love sushi. I'm like, who doesn't? Okay, man.
Yeah.
He's like, everyone knows I love sushi. And then I looked over. He said he looks over to his seat, and in front of it is a tuna sandwich still in the wrapper.
Was it from 7-Eleven?
That's how we described it. That's
because
what it looks like.
They're very into 7-Eleven over there. I would often buy my lunch from 7-Eleven.
Yeah, literally the way he described it was like they ran to a gas station, like picked up a tuna sandwich. It was like, plop that down on a plate on the other side of this guy. With
It's different than our 7-Elevens. You won't get sick from eating there.
I eat 7-Eleven all the time. I don't get sick.
I got deathly ill the last time I ate 7-Eleven.
Bruh. Stop doing that then.
And if I eat a 7-Eleven hot dog, my stomach will literally get so big.
I fucking love 7-Eleven hot dogs.
I look like I'm pregnant.
Love 7-Eleven hot dogs. So obviously, that's a dick move.
Yeah.
And he said it's even a bigger dick move in Japan. They were like,
yeah, no, it's a huge dick move.
They were like, this is a big slight. This is obviously a message that they're trying to send me. That he said that they were obviously trying to tell him, you are the outsider, you are a foreigner, you don't understand how business works here. And Kikakawa, he's the man. He runs this place. You need to not question him. That being said, I guess he said that he was obviously very nice in the meeting. Like it was a very it was meant to be like a subtle jab, but he was nice in the meeting, and he basically said something along the lines of, "Oh, you're too busy to worry about this. Just let us figure this out. It's not your department. Like you're too busy," and deflected all of his questions. So then Woodford asked to speak to Hisashi Mori, who was in the room with them, and he was their VP at the time, and therefore the direct subordinate to Michael Woodford. He asked to talk to him alone. He literally said something. He's like, like Kikakawa-san, if you're this busy, just let me talk to Mori alone, and then you don't have to bother yourself with it. And I guess he got super pissed, but still left. And Woodford was saying that he started talking to Mori, and he was like asking him questions, and Mori was like not giving him any information. And at some point he was like, who do you work for, Mori? Like, who do you work for? And I guess really, really angrily, he said that Mori yelled at him, like, I work for Mr. Kikakawa-san. I am loyal to Mr. Kikakawa-san. So that just gives you a little bit of the insight of what Japanese corporate structure is like, at least then, and I'm sure there's still some ties to it. But that being said, Michael Woodford is a man of virtue, because he would still constantly send emails to Kikakawa and Mori asking questions about the past acquisitions. He did not give up. He just kept sending them emails like, what are these about? Why are we acquiring these stupid companies? Why are we spending so much money on these things? Why is there so much goodwill attached to these acquisitions? Like literally something like 80% of their purchases were in goodwill, like something way too high.
That's crazy.
Which is part about what the Fast article was like. This is weird. Like something sketch is going on. And eventually he started CCing everyone on the board to these emails. He would like ask them questions, call them out, and then CC other members of the board and be like, someone answer these questions. Just airing out all of this laundry extremely publicly and very smartly creating a paper trail.
Yeah, that is smart.
I'm asking these questions in a way that is, I have record of.
Yeah,
right?
That was smart.
So if any of you at home want to be a whistleblower,
this is how you do it.
Send emails and get them to respond over email. Do not talk to them in person about things. Mm-hmm. It's actually a good for anything. You should document anything like this that you're feeling weird about. Despite all this, and all of his pushing, the decision was made to actually promote Woodford to CEO of the whole ass company. Kikakawa was still going to remain as the chairman of the board, but Woodford was going to be CEO. And
so above Kikakawa's?
No, well, they're technically right. They're technically supposed to be even, like the CEO and the board of directors.
Okay.
But that's not really how it was. Michael Woodford believes that they promoted him to CEO in a way to make him more loyal to the board and in a way to dissuade him from resigning, because if he resigns, they know he's just running and taking this to someone. Right. But it's also noted that they didn't release any of this in Japanese. Like there was no press release about him becoming the CEO in Japanese or any Japanese publications. It was just in like one English language publication. They do that? Because they wanted people to know that it doesn't actually mean anything. Mm-hmm. And actually when a spokesperson from the company was asked about the promotion, they were like, "Oh, nothing's changing about the structure of leadership. It's just a change in title." That was it.
What a dick move.
So, they didn't want him to spill the beans.
Yeah.
Woodford then pulled the ultimate Chad move with like a couple of days after being promoted to CEO. He employed PricewaterhouseCoopers to do an investigation into it. Like he gave them their documents and was like, "Look over this, and I want you to tell me if anything's weird about it." see if there's any credence to my suspicions that some misdeeds were done. And when their report said yes, he sent a final email not only to Kikukawa, not only the whole board, not only all of the leaders of their corporate branches all over the world for Olympus, but to senior management at their auditor, Ernst & Young.
Of course.
And in this email, he called for the immediate resignation of Kikukawa and basically every other executive for their roles in the scandal. Like, hey, I went to an auditor. I had them do some forensic accounting. They say shit's weird, just like I've been saying shit's weird. You guys should resign. Hey, auditor, we need to adjust our books, whatever. And what a BDE move.
Yeah.
To be like, oh yeah, I'm not only telling you, I'm going straight to the people who can like arrest you, and you guys need to resign, just like in a public email. That's crazy. So obviously an emergency meeting was called, and they made Woodford wait. They started the meeting late, which in Japan,
that doesn't happen.
What was that like a couple of years ago? The guy who runs their train systems, like I think a train ran like 45 seconds late, and he made a public apology.
Yeah.
Like that's how crazy timing is.
They're very on time. Like you are on time.
And the meeting was supposed to start at 9. They made it wait till like 9:07 or something.
That's a big deal for
like,
them.
Yeah.
It's not like here where like you have a 9 o'clock meeting and it starts at 9:15.
Yeah, 9 o'clock meetings never start at 9. Are you fucking kidding me?
No.
And now that they're over Zoom, you know that someone's going to be like,
oh, I was having problems.
They're moving their mouth and they're like, Helen, we can't hear you. Helen, you're muted.
You're muted, Helen.
And then in the chat, it's just like, I don't know how to work this thing, lol. And then they start 20 minutes late, and you're like, I hate my job. But they made him wait, and finally, when Kikukawa comes in, he goes up to the podium or whatever, and he's like, the agenda of this meeting is to talk about some recent questions about acquisitions and consulting fees that we have paid recently. But I am here to announce that agenda has been struck from the minutes, and the new agenda of this meeting is to discuss the immediate dismissal of Michael Woodford as CEO of this company. And he was like, I'd like to put it to a vote, and every single fucking board member voted to remove Michael Woodford as CEO. They didn't let him talk. They didn't let him vote. They didn't let him do anything. And they were like, all right, get out. We're kicking you out.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And he describes after that going back to his office, and he's like packing his office up, and this like big guy comes in, and he's like, hey, give me your computer. But Michael Woodford had already sent his computers back to the UK.
Nice.
He's like, they're already on their way back to the UK securely. It's done. He's like, okay, give me your phone. So they took his business phone, and he's like, guess what? It's already been wiped. He wiped his phone already. And then
at least he's smart.
And then they were like, give me your private phone. And then I guess he got into a fight with the guy. He's like, fuck no. It's like, my wife's not going to know where I am. Like all this shit. Like, you can't take my private phone. But they tried to muscle him out of his private phone too. And this is a good point or a good time to point out that in that FACTA article, they also made allegations that some of the payments were going to the Yakuza. Like some of the people that got paid actually had ties to the Japanese mafia. And that they were kicking back some of the money to the other companies that they acquired, like people who own the company, and to the Yakuza.
Shit.
So he's kind of like, I don't like this. And then he went to his house to pack up his like the stuff at his place, and he noticed there were these like two really muscly guys in his lobby downstairs.
Oh, fuck.
And no one ever hangs out there, is what he said. He's like, no one's ever in there just hanging out. And when I went in, they were there. And when I left, they were still there.
What the fuck?
So he's scared for his life at this point.
Yeah, I would be too.
But he does one thing before he leaves. He calls a financial reporter in Japan and has him meet him at a cafe and gives this reporter all of his documents, all of his information, and says, use this. And then he flees the country back to the UK
Holy shit.
before someone can
Find out.
kill him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, he kept saying that, I'm worried for my family. I'm worried for me. Like, I think these people are going to hurt me, which is like scary after everything you just did. And you get fired in this big, like, theatrical board meeting. Like, dang. When Woodford got back to the UK, he started a huge PR campaign, like giving interviews to anyone who would listen about the corruption that was going on at Olympus. And although at first, Olympus finally was forced to respond, and they were like, they just denied. Obviously, that's what you do. They're like, Woodford's upset because we fired him. We only fired him because he didn't understand Japanese business, and now he's trying to get back at us. Deny. But eventually, the piper had to get paid. After a few weeks, with growing pressure on Olympus, they finally designated their fall men when they dismissed their internal auditor, Hideo Yamada, and their quality control officer, Hisashi Mori, who was also their VP, and finally admitted that the scheme at least happened. Because now, I mean, literally, they got a forensic auditor's report on their books that said some shit's up. So they just kind of had to. And although Kikukawa claimed to not have known anything at the time, he was like, oh, but I didn't do anything. Right. These guys are kind of a disgrace, but me, I didn't do anything. But a few weeks later, Kikukawa also exited the company by putting his resignation in at a board meeting. A board meeting, by the way, that Woodford was at because he wasn't removed from the board of directors.
Just as CEO?
He was just removed as CEO, so he was like still there for all the rest of this.
Did they forget that they...
I think they were worried about getting even more backlash. Like just being like, oh, you're just firing him because he's bringing these allegations against the company. They were kind of like caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
They knew it couldn't be, like, honestly, firing him as CEO might have been kind of a rash decision to begin with anyway. Like, maybe Kikukawa was just pissed off.
Yeah.
And he walked in that meeting and was like, you know what? We're firing this guy. And like we said, everyone just kind of goes along with it. So if you brought up the question then and there and said, who's for firing this man? They would have all been like, yes. Because they're all literal yes men. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So an investigation was then launched by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, which revealed actual losses of nearly 6.25 billion US dollars. That's not in yen. That is $6.25 billion.
Oh my God.
After which 7 arrests were made, of which the main 3, Kikukawa, Yamada, and Mori, were each sentenced to 4 to 5 years. Suspended, though. And you're probably wondering, what's suspended? It's basically probation. They got to go home and they're on probation. And then at the end of 4 to 5 years, if they haven't done anything other, like any other crimes, they just call it, okay, time served. So they never actually went to jail. And sentenced to 4 to 5 years of what is basically probation. So Japan didn't do any better at prosecuting their Enron than we did with the American Enron.
Shocking.
At least they convicted some people in this one because, I guess Jeff Skilling's got convicted in Enron too, but he served long. He at least went to jail.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. You couldn't at least put him in an actual jail for a little bit? Like, not even a night?
Not even a night.
It's disgusting. However, the company did need to pay out some cold hard cash over the scandal, including 10 million pounds to Woodford for wrongful termination. They settled, gave him 10 million pounds. All right, cool. And a fine of a staggering $594 million from the 3 arrested parties in a shareholder derivative suit.
94 million American dollars?
594 million American dollars, yeah.
What did I say?
You said 94 million.
Oh, I meant 594
million. 594 million.
American dollars, though?
American dollars,
Shit.
yeah. From those 3. So although they didn't have to serve jail time, they did have to pay.
At least they had to pay.
They had to pay a lot of money, at least. and I mean, I don't know how much they really benefited off of this. There was never anything about if they sold stock. I don't think they sold any of their stock before what happened next, which was a huge crash on their stock. Their stock fell 75% from like $8 to like $2.
Oh, shit.
At the time because of the scandal. But that being said, the new executives and the new board, because they fired everyone, they actually did do a good job about just like getting rid of everyone. They righted the ship and restored confidence in Olympus, and Olympus is still around and making cameras today, even though they might not be that much better than iPhones now. I mean, Olympus, those are the cameras I still see used at like sports, you know. But other than that, I don't see anyone with an Olympus camera. No. I don't even see anyone with a camera, to be very honest.
Not other than a photographer. No.
Yeah, and even then they got like a Sony. See Sony cameras, right?
Usually, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know anything about photography. I shouldn't even be saying anything.
I don't know.
Michael Woodford, hero of this story, though, got to ride off into the sunset and now works as a consultant helping other companies maintain ethical business practices from the inside out, which is probably at least like 30% bullshit. But if it's 70% not bullshit, then I'll take it. Sweeping business reform did happen in Japan following the scandal, much like here in America with Enron and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, where in Japan, they placed into practice not allowing the amortization of goodwill anymore, which is also not a part of GAAP here in America, and advising against one person holding concurrent titles of CEO, president, and or chairman of the board. Yeah, any of those at the same time.
Idea.
Not a really good idea. I don't know if that was a law or just like an advisement, which an advisement is not worth anything, but I couldn't remember exactly. But they at least came out and said, like, you probably shouldn't. So, is what it is. So, from medical devices to misdeeds, the crimes of Olympus were anything but microscopic. The books of Olympus, much like the fabrics that may have passed through Antony van Leeuwenhoek's shop, clearly needed some closer inspection. Not only did Olympus engineer a scheme to hide losses for multiple decades, but they made it incredibly clear that anyone who stood in their way would be cut down because they were an unstoppable force. However, Michael Woodford, who came from a nation that eats beans for breakfast, by the way, was an unlikely hero and an immovable object. We champion him as one of the true heroes of the fight against corporate greed. One of the first ones we've ever seen where I was like, yeah, look at this guy. This guy actually has morals. No one's like this. The story of Olympus still isn't fully developed, as they still make cameras to this day. But hopefully the arrest of their top brass helps them get the picture that white-collar crime simply doesn't pay. I'm telling you, I'm trying to write for a really stupid like true crime show. That's
it.
That's how my outros are sounding. They literally sound like hokey. You know the documentaries where they do the dramatizations. Is that right? I don't even know.
Yeah.
And the acting is fucking awful.
Yes.
And they've got stuff like that playing over it.
Yes.
I'm just flexing my muscle on that. So A&E. If you
call us,
if you're doing a white collar crime thing,
we got you, baby.
We'll write it for you. Let's do it. I don't care. We talk about selling out all the time and how it's bad. I'm kind of ready. Yeah, let's just sell out.
I'm gonna sell out.
I'm ready to sell my soul to the devil. Let's go.
Let's do it.
I'm already looking at maybe working for a pharmaceutical company.
Oh my God, Kashan.
I know, we bash those people all the time, and they are evil.
Yeah, they
are evil. So, we'll see. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode on Olympus. It was a crazy story. There's also, if you want to listen more about like Woodford's direct perspective and some of the other things that happened to him, there's a really good BBC documentary on the subject.
Nice.
So they haven't made one for non-bean eating English speakers, but there is one over there. So go and check that out. And if you liked today's episode, you like this episode, you're not running quickly to turn on BBC4 to watch that documentary, then you can go ahead and support us, please, by liking rating this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, shouting out how much you love the podcast in the street to random strangers. That might work. I mean, it can't hurt too much, right? You can do that if you want to support us for free. You can also support us for not free by buying our merch. That's at tpublic.com. The link is in the show description. Or you can go to our website, whitecollarsredhands.com, and click that button that says check out our merch, and that'll take you straight to the page. You can get a hoodie for the weather that's turning cold right now, and that'll help your elbows stay warm.
In your head.
Oh, yeah, and who could forget the most important part, your head. Got that head game on fire.
Oh, damn.
You can check out our socials as well. Facebook.com/whitecollarsredhands. Twitter at whitecollarspod. Instagram at whitecollars_redhands. You can check out our TikTok. It's just whitecollarsredhands. You're probably getting tired of me saying whitecollarsredhands at you.
Take a shot every time Kashawn says whitecollarsredhands.
Oh, you will be so fucked up. You will die. Do it. I don't care.
Yep.
That can't be everything, right? That was quick.
Tell a friend.
I said shout at the street at strangers. That's basically close enough.
Yeah, no, I think that might be it.
Well, all right. Nina needs sleep.
I'm feeling worse.
I'm about to say her stamina has dropped off after the first 5 minutes of recording. So you know what? We got it.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's fine.
I should have stayed home.
Next time. The next time you're sick, we'll do it remote, just like how every single business in America did their meetings. And then you could be the one that's like,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That silence was a visual joke. So go watch our podcast if you wanted to get that one. All right. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week on another episode of White Collars,
Red Hands.